Hello and welcome to EDH Rec's Upping the Average, where we take a commander's average deck list according to the data on EDH Rec and make a couple of quick swaps to it to help you take it from a good start to a great one. This week we're talking about a commander who, despite its name, is not actually that balanced at all, because it's real dang powerful. Teval the Balanced Scale has exploded in popularity. 11,000 decks and counting. Sultai 4/4 Flying Dragon that mills and retrieves a land from our yard on attack, and every time one or more cards leave our graveyard, we make a zombie druid token. A quick glance through Teval's current EDH Rec data reveals a bevy of fantastic cards for this dragon. Sidisi Brood Tyrant players have enjoyed a reign of Sultai value and zombie-tastic token making for many years, but this new Tarkir commander has usurped that throne completely. Already the number 4 Sultai commander and well on its way to take third or maybe even second place among that crowd. Let's grab Teval's average deck list from EDH Rec. These features here let us see the average deck list and even import it directly onto a deck building website so that we can tinker or even playtest it. So let's ship this right on over to Archidect and get brewing. Here we are with Teval's average deck list according to the data, based on the average ratio of creatures, lands, sorceries, etc., and which of those cards are the most popular for this commander within each of those categories. This is a rough estimation of a typical Teval deck. There's quite a lot in common here with the Teval Precon, of course, because, let's be honest, that Precon was very good right out of the box. But there's been a lot of upgrading going around for this commander too. Also, remember our rule in this series. Any swaps that we make here must keep the total price of the deck cost neutral or else help to lower the overall cost of the list. Now, some folks might see the price of this average deck and balk at that figure, but let me assure you, the vast majority of that price is just because of a snazzy mana base. If you didn't play these shocks and fetches and that Field of the Dead, you'd save like $200. As we often see in this series, the difference between making an expensive deck versus a budget deck is usually down to a super tiny number of culprits. The price is usually concentrated in just a small handful of cards. And I'll provide some other budget suggestions at the end of this video, so stick around for that. And hey, don't forget, while you're looking over the list, you can also give us a like and a subscribe, or check out some of our Patreon exclusive content over at patreon.com/EDHRecast. This deck list is of course linked down in the description below, along with a link to all of our personal deck lists on the channel as well. So, how does this deck work? Well, it's a fusion of graveyard value and landfall. Teval fills the yard and ramps us while also making tokens, and there are so many ways to get individual Teval triggers to absolutely swell our board with zombies. And along the way, some of these will just be hugely powerful in their own right. Tortured Existence and Conrad in the list, dealing damage as cards swap in and out of the yard, is really good even if Teval isn't in play to also make zombie tokens while we do it. Even without our commander in play, bringing back a whole bunch of lands from our graveyard with like an Ob Nixilis on the battlefield to chunk someone for 18 life is just plain awesome. Can't forget too that there's potential to combo in this list as well. Keru Goldkeeper in particular, making that treasure token every time one or more cards leave our graveyard will feed into many 1-mana ways to keep things going and going and going. It's not a 2-card combo, but it is the kind of thing that could emerge later on in the game and clinch us the win. On that note, with there being a possibility to combo with more than just 2 cards, probably at some point in the late game, and with the game changer Field of the Dead in the starting average list, it's very safe to call this a bracket 3 deck, and that will inform our changes. So, with all that, what are we adding to upgrade this average deck? Well, I've got a bone to pick with you Teval players. I'm wagging my finger over here because there is a huge hole in this deck. I'm going to start off with some easy swaps and things, but yeah, there's going to be something much bigger that we have to address later on. First swap is going to be an easy one. Grizzly Salvage is a great card, but read it carefully. It doesn't trigger Teval because there's no card that ends up leaving our graveyard, which is fine. Not every single card in the deck needs to necessarily trigger Teval, but we could swap it for the card Cash Grab. We don't need to care about the squirrel food token thing. That part doesn't matter. This spell is also an instant. It's minorly easier to cast. It digs down a roughly similar amount, and it will also trigger extra leave the graveyard effects. So I'm happy to make this changeover. Another thing I'm really excited to do, my favorite card for Teval decks is Augmenter Pugilist, or rather, the back half Echoing Equation. We'll have so many zombie tokens, and wouldn't they be better if they were all something else for a little while? Maybe we suddenly have 5 Tevals, which then each attack and each mill and each trigger when lands leave our graveyard, and then suddenly we end up with 1 billion zombies by the end of it? Or maybe we turn all of our tokens into Sir Conrads or whatever? This is a super budget card and a huge surprise for any table when we have this many tokens to take advantage of. And in exchange, I'm actually going to toss the Gerard in the starting list out of the deck. I like Gerard plenty, his recovery ability is especially neat here, but here's the issue. This card was in the starting precon deck because that deck also contained things like Lord of Extinction and Consuming Aberration, which aren't in this average deck list. People have been cutting those out as they've been upgrading their decks, but Gerard has still held over. Our largest creatures in this list tend to be about 5 or 6 power, which isn't quite as compelling compared to our other win condition opportunities. This list reflects a Teval population that is going wide rather than going tall, so our win condition effects should probably try and lean into those capabilities instead. I'm also a little critical of this mana base. For one thing, just 36 lands? I'd rather start with 37 in most decks in general, but especially when the commander needs a density of lands to even make the ability get full value, I'm getting at least one more in here, and it's gonna be the card Mosswort Bridge. A super cheap card to acquire, and we make enough bodies that it is dead easy to trigger this free spell. While I'm at it, I'm also going to exchange these 2 lands for the other 2 bounce lands that aren't in this deck list just yet. We have a Golgari Rot Farm in the deck already, but I'd like these 2 to also join the party. I'm a fiend for bounce lands, especially in a deck that cares about things like landfall triggers. And hey, discarding a card to hand size if we play one of these on turn 2 is not a problem for us. We're a graveyard deck. Getting these 2 in will complete the trio, and that I just think feels grand. Really though, this deck should probably be playing closer to 38 or maybe even 39 lands, but I'm gonna leave this here for now, because the land count is not the biggest problem that I have with this deck. Alright, the easy stuff is over. Now we gotta talk about the big thing. I said I have a bone to pick with Teval players, and here it is, the thing that convinced me that I needed to make a video for this commander. The removal suite. This deck only contains 1 card that could be called a board wipe and like 4 pinpoint removal spells. Yes, you heard me right. Teval players, you need to run more removal. I'm not a guy who likes to say things like, just play more removal. We've done an entire episode about some of the problems that I think can be attached to simple phrases like that. That those types of phrases can sometimes run the risk of being reductive, that they might shut down conversation rather than promoting understanding. That sometimes they're used sort of like a flex, a way of showing off one's own smarts and centering the advice giver, rather than being a sincere attempt to help other players improve and centering the needs of the advice seeker. But I'll be damned, because the just play more removal crowd, they're kind of right about this one. I know the best form of creature removal is player removal, but seriously, I don't think this deck is operating at a fast enough speed to definitely win before it needs to engage with the stuff your opponents are up to. There are like 4.5 removal spells in the average Teval deck list. The starting precon had more than that in it. I know that some of them were like expensive and clumsy, but they were at least existent, so this list is kind of a step backward in that regard. If one of your opponents starts to take off and you only have a 5% chance that your deck can even gesture at trying to make that opponent stumble, the math ain't mathin'. So listen, Teval players, I'm trying to do you all a favor here. I am going to try and take the L on your behalf, okay? I will be the one to eat crow and let that whole crowd come after me instead of coming after you. But you gotta do your part, all right? I'm gonna take the heat. They're gonna tell me that I was always wrong, and then while they're distracted because they get to tell me, I told you so, you are gonna go run and put more interaction spells into your deck. And then you're gonna be able to say, well, the average Teval deck is only playing like 4 or 5 removal spells, but not me. And they'll never know. And here's the kicker, you're gonna win more games this way because you won't be steamrolled quite as often by another player getting their engine online faster than you. All right, that's the plan. So, deal? Deal. So yeah, we're gonna make this deck a lot more interactive. There's a lethal scheme in the deck list already, which is great with all of our zombie tokens convoking it for free, so I'm gonna toss this card in too. We must construct additional pile-ons. These cards are basically siblings, and I think they're happy to reunite in this type of deck. Next, we can make so many tokens so dang often that I'm gonna say Junkwinder is an all-star in this deck too. Like in our main phase, we play a couple of cards that make a couple of zombies and then tap down someone else's blockers, then attack with Teval, make another zombie mid-attack and tap and stun another creature. It's gonna be open season to keep attacking and attacking because everyone else's meaningful creatures will be perma-sleeping. Good luck hitting us on a crackback swing because Junkwinder just keeps knocking things down. Just what a great way to not have to worry about everyone else's creatures. Alright, now here's a real doozy. It's a situational one, but Screams from Within. Enchanted creature gets a -1/-1, and when that creature dies, the enchantment will come back for a new victim. If we're against a board of a whole bunch of 1/1 tokens, this will pick off one of them and then come right back. It left our graveyard, therefore triggering Teval to make our own zombie token, and then the next 1/1 that we enchanted will also die, doing it again and again and again, making a token every single time. We can KO a whole bunch of tiny tokens and make our own huge number of tokens in exchange for them. Just, yes, this is a cool piece of anti-token tech, and we at least gotta try to make this type of synergy happen. Imagine the look on your opponent's faces if you get to pull this off. I'm actually going to exchange the Putrefy in the original list for Awaken the Honored Dead instead. I don't love Putrefy, sorry, I think we need something that's a bit more flexible that can hit any permanent. Plus, we have a Muldrotha in this deck, so her being able to return an enchantment feels important to me. And this card mills us and even triggers our commander on a later chapter, etc, etc. The Putrefy is fine, but this card has some proper synergy for the deck. And then, of course, we need something that is a more substantial board clear. We don't have a huge budget to work with because, again, our rule is that any swaps made must make the total end result of the deck cost equal or less than the starting deck cost, so the expensive board wipes like Deluge, Kindred Dominance, Raise the Palisade, or even Cyclonic Rift are off the table. But there are still several other cool cards that we could try. I think Perplexing Test could work really great with all of these tokens, Crux of Fate saves our commander perhaps, Azuri's Predation would widen our board even more, but my pick is River's Rebuke, to really screw over an archenemy. Sometimes you don't need to mess with everybody, you just need to topple one giant and open the gates to their demise. And maybe it will even buy you some goodwill with the other players at the table, so that they don't notice that we're actually planning on getting this back with an Eternal Witness to then do it to them next time. For real though, I picked this one because it hits more than just creatures, and it gives our board of tokens free reign. It basically means that they can't be blocked, which I think this deck probably needs sometimes. A board full of 2/2s is great, but sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes you gotta find a way to get them through the door. And this type of card does exactly that job and sets an archenemy back to boot. And it's doing so for barely 50 cents. And finally, many of you longtime EDH reckoners will EDH recognize this one, Arachnogenesis. Remember when this card was like $30 or something? Like this card was like $30 frickin' dollars, and now it's like 68 cents. In the late game, when people are crater hoofing and overwhelming stampeding, this saves your life and sets you up for a great following turn. This card is clutch. It is not removal in the classic sense, but it is interaction, and it will save you in the stickiest spots of the game. Okay, I feel so much better with those pieces of interaction in the deck. But to add cards like this, we must cut. So, what else is on the chopping block? First, these. Forbidden Alchemy has the same problem as Grisly Salvage, and that flashback cost is a little bit too expensive to reliably ever use. Crawling Sensation is kinda neat, but it's slow in this deck in a way that I just don't jive well with. Sorry, pals. Diviner of Mist and Lost Monarch of Ifnir are really interesting ones. I like what they're attempting. They can make really good value when our commander is doing the thing. But I think my problem with them is this. When our game plan is going, they provide us with more value. But when our game plan is going like that, what we need is something that pushes us over the edge. Like if we're in a spot where we can attack with some zombies, I don't just want them to have Afflict and to maybe get a creature from our graveyard back to our hand. I want them to deal proper damage. Not just give us value, but a proper late game oomph. We have several other win condition style cards that don't just grant us more value in those positions, but rather they threaten our enemy and put them on a clock. Which is why, to me, these cards kind of stick out like a sore thumb. I worry that these two are a little bit win more as a result, and might be better suited to other commanders who will take more advantage of their abilities more reliably. Confession, I also don't love Floral Evoker here. I feel like I should, but I don't know, the +1 counters are fine. I don't know, as far as 3-mana landfall payoffs go, I'd rather have a Scoot Swarm, and the activated ability is okay, but we already have so many other ways of getting our lands out of our graveyard. This just seems like it's fiddly. It's not my favorite, and I don't think that we'll end up missing it. Cutting this card to make room for other pieces of removal or interaction that could save our hide feels more important. I think we'll want an interaction piece in our hand instead of this card in our hand every time here. here. If people think I'm miscalculating on this card, by all means, let me have it in the comments. And our last cut is our weirdest one, Cultivate. Listen, we already have at least 11 other cards that provide mana advantage in this deck, possibly more depending on how you're counting your mana advantage. Cultivate's a classic. This is not a bad card, duh. I just think the other ramp that we have just speaks more to this deck's mission. Ramp on turn 2 that will get our commander out on turn 3, for instance. All I'm saying is that if Cultivate was vital to this deck's mission, then its sister, Kodama's Reach, would show up on Teval's EDH rec page. But it doesn't. Kodama's Reach shows up in less than 5% of Teval decks, so I think we should probably take that as a sign. And again, we have a substantial amount of other mana accelerants in the deck already, so I think we will be okay without this one. And that is it. But before we go, some honorable mentions. First, if you're building this deck on a budget, well, the Precon is obviously the place to start. But truly, if you're just looking at this starting list, and if you want to build on a budget based off of this model, I really wasn't kidding with what I said before. Cutting out just a handful of the lands lops off like $200 from this deck's price. And hey, ignore Altar, Scarab God, and Tortured Existence, and you'll save another $35. I recommend instead playing some more removal, like maybe some of the other board wipes that I suggested earlier. Or take a page out of Sidisi's book and play a couple more zombie pumping synergies in here. We're making a whole lot of tokens that have the same creature type, so a couple of kindred payoffs could really add up with this many of them in play. On the flip side, if you're looking to lean in and play this deck on a higher budget, well, I'm gonna try something new here. I could talk your ear off about tons of expensive cards, but since this deck falls into bracket 3, I'm going to suggest which other 2 game changers I would say this deck would want to prioritize to match with the 1 game changer that is already in this list. In the event that you did want to go up to that threshold of playing 3 game changers to stay at bracket 3, I think the other ones that this deck would want to prioritize are Rift and Rhystic. Hardly original, I know. Probably the 2 most boring cards that I could pick, to be honest. But here's why I choose them over, like, Tutors or Fierce Guardianship and whatnot. Our removal is still the thing that I think is the shakiest in this list, and if you don't like River's Rebuke and you're not held by the same budget that we were in this video, then Rift would kind of be your girl, you know? And as for Rhystic, well, the best pairing for a deck that ramps this much is going to be a lot more card draw. Free counter magic and tutors would help a deck's resiliency, but this deck's recursion and ramp capabilities already make it very resilient, so removal and extra card flow are the places that I would want to shore up the most while still staying in the bracket 3 space. Of course, there are so many other options you could go to once you really unleash the shackles here. Putting in Phyrexian Altar to pair with the Gravecrawler to really lean into some possible combo territory could serve many people well, but some folks may not want to lean into combo territory. Frankly, I think the most universal thing that most players will have in common, whether they're staying in bracket 3 or going even further into bracket 4, when upgrading this list will be to lean even further into the possible lands that you can run. Namely cards like Shifting Woodland, Takenuma, Boseiju Who Endures, and the Battle Bond duels for color fixing. Those would be the final flourishes that I would want to include to really spruce this deck up. And I think that will be universally true for a whole lot of players if they are building this deck on a higher budget. And, well, okay, I can't help it. One last thing. In the event that you do want to dip into that bracket 4 territory by messing with other people's lands, well, Guildleaf Archdruid can't help but notice that the zombie tokens that Teval makes are also druids, and it could turn all of your tokens into land-stealing thieves. It's a little bit mean, but it's just something that I thought I'd point out as fun food for thought. And there we have it, our final Teval the Balanced Scale deck. You can find this deck list down in the description below with the cuts in the maybe board. And of course, if you liked what you saw, please don't forget to show your appreciation via the YouTube buttons while you're checking that deck out. I hope you enjoyed this haul with Teval. If you have any secret tips or cool tech for your fellow Sultai players, make sure you let them hear it down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, remember, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.